Coucou, what's up? It's your girl Kadija, aka the musingknomad, and I'm back again with another video. First and foremost, I want to wish you all a happy new year, or en français, bonne année. It's been a while that I haven't been back, and I decided to come back with a video talking about the myths and the legends of what it is to be American and how I view that after having lived abroad in Eurasia, aka Europe, but more specifically France for the past decade. So I've been in France now for over a decade, and most likely I'm probably gonna stay. It wasn't in the cards. It's not what I thought I was going to be doing. It's not somewhere I imagined being long term like this, but I'm still here, and for the time being, I think this is gonna be home. So I moved to France in my 20s, and now I'm in my 30s, and the majority of my adult years have actually now been in France rather than in the US. And I'm just gonna talk about some things, okay? So I tried to make this 6 myths, but likely it's one myth in particular is going to be a lot larger, more encompassing than the others, but I think it fits in well. In the past, like years ago, I made videos about moving to France. If you're interested in moving to France, things to do, setting up, and all of that stuff. Those videos still are available on my channel, so check them out. If you have any questions about moving here, tips and things that I can do to help, please let me know. Others in the past have messaged me on Instagram, so check me out on Instagram and via the comment section and ask me questions, and I'm more than happy to help if I can, right? So if you have questions, yeah, by all means, send me a message and I'll do my best to get back to you. But let me just say this, right? I'm biased, as we all are, right? We all have our biases. I have a particular lens that I see the world. I see the world as a Black woman. That's how the world sees me, and that's how I view the world, right? I live in this body, and based how the world treats me in this body is how I view certain things, right? So that's just a little caveat, but I think for the most part the things I'm talking about are pretty general, but I'm not someone that's apolitical, okay? Fight the power all day, every day. The personal is political. But anyways, let's get started with all of that. I think the biggest myth that people have in the US and the rest of the world probably sees is American exceptionalism. This is an idea that is forced down the throats of Americans or people living in the US as the US is the greatest, the best thing since sliced bread. The US is number one when it comes to everything. You are indoctrinated from a young age until adulthood, death, to believe that the US is the best, nothing better, no one will ever compete. This is the idea that we are pushed when we're growing up. A small way you can look at this is, I remember growing up in elementary school, or from elementary school K through 12, right? So that is kindergarten to 12th grade when you graduate high school. You are supposed to be, doing the pledge to allegiance. And when I think about it, I was like, I've always been a little, okay, I'm gonna stand up for my rights. If I think something's strange or weird, I'm not doing it. From elementary school, I was not participating, okay? And I used to get in trouble with my teachers when I was standing up and pledging my allegiance to the US. For what? It's so bizarre, because when you look at, like, let's say North Korea, like, it's giving dictatorship. Why am I standing there every morning looking at the flag, pledging to allegiance? And speaking of the flag, everywhere you go in the US, flags galore. Flags galore. It is just like, oh my God. And many ways, and people want to show that they're real America, right? They're gonna have the flag on their truck. They're gonna have the flag like at their home. It's just a symbol to show your patriotism. Me personally, I've never been patriotic. I'm not patriotic because I live in France. I'm not patriotic because I'm American. I've never been one that's patriotic. I don't love a country just for the fact that it is a country. I value certain things that are from the US, from France, or other parts of the world, etc. But I'm not personally someone that's patriotic, and I don't ever see myself being that, right? But patriotism is something that is expected, right? And there's certain demographics where if you don't showcase your patriotism, your America, you're viewed in a certain light, right? Or it's a way to signal that, like, yeah, America. If you catch my drift, you might know what I'm talking about, right? So the patriotism is just, it's sickening, because after having lived in France, it's not something that you see often. You're not gonna go every single place you go, you're gonna see the French flag. Like, obviously you're gonna see the French flag, you're in France, but it's not a thing where you see it everywhere, every place you go. It's just, it's a bizarre, honestly. And other parts of the world that I visited, other parts of Eurasia, other parts of, let's say, Africa, etc., that I visited, I've never seen patriotism to the like of the US. So that's something I've noticed that I think is odd. And I love the fact that when I'm like in other parts of the world, it's something I don't feel like is being forced down on me. Again, I haven't been to every place in the world, but these are just my experiences. These are things that I've seen. And that I think this is something that is very particular to America. And it does tie into this ideal that America is the best, it's the greatest, it's the best country in the world, and it will forever be this. When you think about it, this American-centric idea it's by design. It is to make Americans live in this cocoon, to think that there's nothing better than the US, so you are not going to want to travel and connect and learn from other people. And I think that's the part that is really damaging, and it's such a shame that people live in such a confined way of seeing the world. Granted, the US is a large country, right? You can go from one end to the other and you'll meet different people. And there's might be certain things, cultural things in that particular area that might be different from where you're from, but it's never going to be the same as if you were to go somewhere that has a complete different system, whether that is language, whether that is just the way they view the world, etc., right? So I just think this design that we have of the home of the free and the brave, okay, we are independent, we are individualistic, it's sad. In some aspect, I'm sure you can find positive aspects of that, but just thinking that you're the best in the world and nothing is better than you, will be better than you, is just a very arrogant way of seeing the world. And I recall this one time, this is like the earlier years when I first moved to France. It was in the evening, me and a friend were walking home after being out, and some drunk guy he heard that we were speaking English, and he came by to try to talk to us, but like, it was a little, right? And then, like, because we were not trying to engage, he's like, "Oh, fuck you Americans," and I was just like, what, do you think I'm gonna feel bad? Do you think I'm hurt because you said that, just because you just assume that I'm just some American that's stupid because you went to the fact of, like, you guys don't know anything, you think you're the best? I've never thought that, right? That's never been my reality personally. I'm someone that's always been very, like, interested in the rest of the world and seeing and exploring. So, like, when he thought he was, like, cussing me out, I was just like, girl, bye-bye, okay? Please, I do not have the time for this, okay? The largest of the myths. So this one, I broke it down in several aspects. So it's, all of this for me encompass what freedom is, right? So I'm going to talk about gun violence, education, healthcare, the cost of living / job security, food, transportation, etc. Freedom, like I mentioned earlier, the home of the free and the brave, right? This is something that's pushed down on you when the military is trying to recruit high schoolers, right, to join them. The selling point is always free education, help with housing, job security. That is the number one thing when your recruiters are coming to high school to get young people to join the military. And I think it's always interesting how they always tend to go to poorer neighborhoods, or neighborhoods where it's more mixed, right? It's not just like a predominantly white school or an affluent neighborhood. They definitely try to go to areas where they can use those selling points to attract people. But it's so funny to me how this very thing that the US military tries to use to gain people to join the army is the very thing that the US doesn't stand by. So when we talk about freedom, what does freedom really actually mean? Because basic needs are not met when you're an American. The ability to have an education, apart from K through 12 again, right? It's expensive. It's something that you have to go in debt to have an education, to advance your life, right? Which in turn will help you gain more money if you're getting, a certain job that's going to be in a field that's going to help you gain more money, right? having access to healthcare. That again gets tied to the type of job that you have, or how good the benefits are from your job, right? Or even let's say you don't have a job that's giving you insurance for healthcare. If you're having to pay out of pocket and you're paying upwards or minimum, let's say $500 per month to have access to insurance, just to again have your basic needs met, or not being able to trust the food supply. These are things where, for me, when I think about it, and having lived in France, I'm like, if these basic things are not met, I cannot say that I feel like I'm free. How am I free? Freedom of the press? Can we even say that's free? Because the press is owned by a few groups. We live in an oligarchy. Unfortunately, that is kind of the reality of what the US is. And I'm going to go into that more later. But when I think about that, I don't know if you guys are aware, recently there was a cartoonist who resigned, I think from the Washington Post, which now Jeff Bezos owns, because she wanted to post this cartoon showing the billionaires, bowing down to Trump and, giving them money so they can do whatever they want to do. And her cartoon not being published because the oligarchic because Bezos was not obviously going to be happy with that, or no one wanted to offend the actual leaders of the world, right? So if the press, the New York Times, because since the war in Palestine has been happening, right, they're firing journalists, not actually posting authentic, real, factual truths about what was going on. So if the press is owned by a select few, so certain ideas that we want to push forth, we can't. Fox News is owned by this, I think, if memory serves me right, Fox News, and I think the person that owns the New York Times is some racist Australian guy. I can't think of his name right now. If you know the name, please let me know below. So the places we get our news from, are they really free if they're owned by a select few and there's certain things certain things can't be put in the press because of who it's owned by? Where do our freedoms really lie? So going back to the freedom, for me, one of the things that I prefer about living in France is most likely speaking, right? Because owning a gun, you're not allowed to own a gun in France. I think there's some caveats to that. I think if you want to do hunting, I believe you can. I think there's a caveat to that. It's not just, you can't own a gun, period. But just wanting to have a gun as far as self-defense, I want to keep it in my home just because I want to have it, is not a thing here. The US is the number one country per capita that owns the most guns. When I think about that, that does not make me feel safe, considering that every so often, within a few months or so, you're going to hear about a school shooting happening, a cinema shooting happening, a church shooting happening. There's these domestic terrorists that keep going and killing people, and nothing is being done by that, right? So for me, the fact that the US government officials have come together to ban TikTok, well, supposedly it's going to be banned tomorrow, because I'm filming this, today is the 18th, so it's going to be banned apparently tomorrow, have come together to ban TikTok because of national security. However, is that really it? Because it really seems like Facebook, former TikTok or former Twitter, etc., just really want to monopolize these TikTok and benefit from it. Really, that's really what it is, right? Because there goes Zuckerberg just reneging on the factual things that you can actually post on Facebook now, right? So again, at the end of the day, it's all about money. It's just about control and power, and that's really what it is. So I hope TikTok does not sell, okay, does not bend to the will to the US government. Somebody will make something else, right? But again, this is all about power. But I'm saying this to paint the picture of the government can come together to ban TikTok under the guise of national security, but we cannot come together and ban guns or limit access to guns. so we don't continue having gun violence in the US. That for me is something I can't fathom, and I don't feel safe, honestly, because of that, like being in the US. Whereas here, it is not something I worry about. I don't worry that, like, and again, it's not to say that it couldn't happen, but the likelihood of it happening is very slim. I don't worry that I'm gonna be in a cinema one day and somebody's gonna come in with a gun and start shooting people, or in a grocery store, or anywhere. That is a scary thought. It's sad to have to think that people have to live like that. And it doesn't make any sense to me. For being the most powerful, quote unquote, greatest country in the world, why does your greatness, your freedom, have to impose on other people? Well, it doesn't make sense to me. So that's something I personally can't fathom, but you know, it's America. So moving on to education. Again, for me, this fits under freedom, right? Because this is the home of the free and the brave, quote unquote. If we're so free, I don't think education should have to cost an arm and a leg. I think the US has exceptional, wonderful institutions for school. I do. I think there's some great institution. Because of the fact that I am a graduate and I have my degrees, it's afforded me the life that I have, right? Where I can move and travel. But it doesn't mean that because I have my degree, that's the only reason I have been able to do the things that I've done in life, right? I can, with or without it, I probably would have, but it facilitated, it made things easier for me to be able to do that, right? Because I was able to study abroad in France while I was in undergrad, that kind of it got the ball rolling, right? And having that experience made me want to come back to France, and I made it happen. And that, for me, I'm so grateful for because of the education that I have. But that education also came with the fact that while I did have some grants and some scholarships, etc., I did eventually have to take out loans. And I actually ended up having to do that because of my study abroad. But I am so glad that I did, because that experience was so worth it for me. But it's a shame that someone, one has to go in debt to be able to experience things like that. And for me, one of the ways that I decided to kind of help with that debt was joining AmeriCorps. And let me tell you, that was probably the most difficult job I've had. And I was commuting 4 hours per day, 4 hours, 2 hours each way. That, after that experience, is when I ended up coming to France. So I'm like, I have not looked back, okay? But the idea that students have to go in debt to be educated is sad. The idea that we're pushing forth, what is it called? Oh my God, what are these people calling it? I can't think of the name right now. Please, it'll probably come up to me when I'm editing the video. But getting rid of actual history, because white people in the US are afraid to come to terms with the fact that your ancestors and you currently are benefiting off of the fact that slavery happened in the US, right? And taking out actual facts in the history books because it's going to make white children or other white people in general feel bad or feel like they're the bad guys. I mean, it is a fact. It is what it is. It happened. So either you can learn from it and do better in the future, or we can start repeating the same cycle that it just seems to be happening now. And it's a shame that people are going to these extremes to not actually teach realities, factualities that have happened in the US. So I think it's just a shame that the idea of the DEI hires, or the idea that the Equal Rights Act is just there to benefit minorities, when in fact white women are the ones that have gained the most when it comes to the Equal Rights Act, right? And I know Reaganomics wants to push forth the idea of the welfare mammy. When we look about that as well, white women are the largest recipient of welfare. So oftentimes things are skewed, right, to push forth these ideals that people have of who's really reaping the benefits of the country, the government, etc. And when you look at the numbers don't lie. But minorities, quote unquote, are we're the minorities, right? Our population is much smaller than white people. So if we were to say 75% of the US population is white and then 25% is quote unquote minority, how could we ever be the ones that are reaping the benefits for real of these quote unquote hires? right? And you can look at it now when it comes to the fires that are going on in California, where they're blaming it, the media's trying to blame it on the fire departments that are there because they're being led by women or people of color. It's really baffling and interesting, but it's a shame that the system is becoming what it is, right? One of the things I personally value in France is the fact that education is basically free. Basically free. There are exceptions to the rules, right? If you want to go to a specific engineering school, there are schools in France that you do have to pay for. I think maybe it's what, like 300, I don't know. Let's just say 5,000 euros, probably less than that, right? Per year. I think that's much less than that, right? But even as someone that is a foreigner, if I wanted to go to school, it's a few hundred euros a year. But again, it's just the ideas that we have of certain things is work. But I will say personally, I do prefer the American like college experience versus, let's say, the French college experience, because it's very different, right? There are, things, there are pros and cons to things, but I think all in all, the fact that education is so expensive, people are going into debt. Thousands of, let's say average, is 30,000 a year, and that's probably on the low end for a cost of a school, right? It's just unfathomable that you're paying this much. And then imagine when it's foreigners that want to go to school in the US, they have to pay probably double that, and also prove that they can stay here without having to reap anything off of the government. It's really a shame that this is the system that we have. Next, under the freedom umbrella is healthcare. One of the things that I value about France is the healthcare. Let me just say, the first couple of years that I was here, I never even went to the doctors because one, I was afraid it was going to be really expensive. I didn't want to be in debt. Like, okay, I knew people in my family who went in debt for medical expenses. And I will say this, I am not happy with Biden, especially with regards to how he's handled the war on Gaza by Israel, and the US government is funneling funding towards Israel with regards to that. I'm not happy with him when it comes to that. However, the fact that just before he's leaving, he's signed into effect, I hope it will go into effect, but correct me if I'm wrong, how we're going to eliminate showing medical debt on the credit scores. I think that's a wonderful thing because it's going to help a lot of people. And it's a shame that people have to go into debt for just a basic necessity of life. Healthcare. I personally, living in France, I don't mind that I am paying higher taxes for the fact that healthcare is cheap. Okay, and in the years I've been here, the prices have gone up. I think now when you go to a general doctor, because they have two versions of this, right? You can go to a practitioner that is level 1, or practitioners is level 2, and level 2 they can kind of charge whatever they want, which is usually double the normal price. So a normal practitioner is about, I think, let's say 25 euros per visit, right? But with the Sécurité Sociale that French has, 70% of that is covered by them, and then the rest you have to pay out of pocket. And if you have a job, you can get insurance through your job, and then your job will cover that 30%, right? So it is so, and it's so cheap. Medication is so cheap. Like, when I look at how much a medication will cost, it's like 30 euros. Like, I remember I had to get an IUD. The IUD, it ended up being free, but it was like, let's say 30 euros. The US could never. Okay? Something else that, and this is a journey that I'm actually going through and I plan on documenting. So if you're interested in wanting to know about this, please let me know. Something that was recently passed a few years ago in France is the ability for women, okay, and single women who are not undergoing any medical issues that would make them infertile, can do egg freezing for free. The only aspect of it that you have to pay for is just the freezing aspect, and even that is really inexpensive. So the fact that in the US, if you want to freeze your eggs to give yourself that freedom to have a child, if you want to have a child, whatever you want, it's so nice that this country is affording that to women. And this was a long fight, okay, for women to be able to have this, but finally, since I think it was 2021, it's now accessible. However, the wait period, the hoops you have to jump through is difficult, but for the fact that, like, it's free, So I'm paying free 99 instead of paying the average of $11,000 per cycle in the US is crazy. And basically you can do it as many times, to harvest the eggs as possible. Like within, they have like time limits of when you can and cannot do it. So if you want to know more about that, I can go into detail about that, like in that specific video. But having that, I think, is wonderful. But I will also say, knowing that the birth rates are plummeting all over the world, I personally think it's a good thing. It's a good thing for the fact that it is going to... Capitalism doesn't work when you don't have the slave force behind it. And that's kind of what the world is seeing. And that's why a lot of countries are trying to push women to have kids or, make it easier. But the US doesn't want to make it easier, because you can look at how, when it comes to leave after you've had a child, that's not even something that you're guaranteed to be, for it to be paid for. Just a lot of things, when you look at it, you're just like, y'all are really advanced. This is a real, good country, because it's not giving that. It doesn't look like that when you don't really care about the basic necessities of your citizen. That, for me, is sad. It's unfortunate to think that your citizens can't afford health care. They barely have job security. And we're free? What is free? And at the end of the day, when it comes to this free system of quote unquote capitalism, that's really what it's there for. It's just to benefit the very few and take advantage of the many. I've seen a lot of propaganda being pushed, let's say even by Macron. Recently, Macron said something, this may be like a year or two ago, I don't remember exactly when, of pushing this thing to test fertility. And was the same person who does not have a child because he's married to his, that's how I see it, because it's giving Mary Kay Letourneau. He's actually married to his teacher. Okay, so he's talking about, people need to make more kids. Why don't you go make some kids with your woman? Okay, so a lot of, I'm using that example because a lot of countries, leaderships are, in the US included, are trying to push for women basically producing more children to feed the capitalistic system that we have, i.e. why Roe versus Wade was removed, unfortunately, by the Supreme Court that we have now. But anyways, moving on. So another aspect of freedom that I think is really important, and this is a driving force all over the world when it comes to inflation currently, is the cost of living, and I'm tying that with job security. So one of the things I personally really appreciate about France, and it's also a double-edged sword in France, is the fact that once someone is hired and they have a permanent contract, to fire them, it's not that it's impossible. It's definitely possible. It's difficult, okay? So that gives people a lot of job security. And one of the things that I've noticed as of late when it comes to, if you want to teach English in France, a lot of companies now are hiring only, in French it's called auto-entrepreneur, self-employed individuals. I know some people who have a type of visa where it allows them to be able to create their own jobs or create their own little companies, but it's difficult when you have a certain job or a certain visa and you can't do that, right? But again, I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody that is non-French, right? But in saying that, when you do have a certain job and a specific contract, like a CDE, which is a permanent contract, je sais pas comment dire ça, mais ça soulage. I don't know how to say that in English right now. It's comforting. It gives you a peace of mind, right? But again, kind of the things I've mentioned before. But if you are ever in a situation where you don't have a job, your funding is low, if you've put into the system, you can have access to it. When it comes to the thing that I mentioned before, it's called RSA. If you just move to France, you're not gonna have access to that. You need to have been here at least 5 years. There are certain things that you have to have done, put into the system before you can have access to it. Once you do, it's basically like you're French, but you're not, right? So I think it's great that when it comes to job security, if you have a CDE, you can be at ease. Whereas in the US, companies can fire at will. you don't really have job security unless it's your company. But even then, if it's your company, it's, you know, it's difficult if you have an LLC or whatever type of company that you have, an S corp, whatever. It's hard to maintain that if you're just starting off, right? Now, if you're a big corporation, okay, and you are abusing the system, i.e., United Health, okay, these insurance companies, i.e. State Farm, taking away fire insurance, just removing it when this fire is happening currently in California. These companies doing grimy things to people, right? But sorry, going back to the job security, it's wonderful to have that, especially with regards to the rising cost of living for everything. It's a shame that in the US, I think the minimum wage is like the national minimum wage. I don't know exactly what it is, but let's say the last time I saw this, I think it was like $7 and some change. This was years ago, the last time I even looked into this. So I don't know what it is currently, but it's much lower than, you know, obviously it's different state by state, but the national minimum wage is ridiculous. No one can live with that. When you think about the cost of living, depending on where you live, all of these things, the cost of food, all of this stuff, it doesn't make sense that, again, when it comes to the basic necessities of life, people don't have, comment on dit le mot? Je sais pas le mot. People don't feel at ease. They're not comforted that it's going to be okay, right? The government is not there really to help. You know, in some aspect, yes, for sure. In some aspects, but generally it doesn't help the day-to-day normal person. And I think that's really a shame if people don't feel, you know, assured in life, right? Because companies can, you know, get rid of you whenever they want to. And then the cost of everything is increasing, yet the wages are not matching, right? How is it rent for a place is now $2,000 minimum? So I think like in Seattle, the rents have like doubled, right? Again, I left over a decade ago. So if I was paying at the time, let's say it was like $700 a month for an apartment, and now it's $1,600, $2,000, and the wages are not going up by much. How do you expect people to live? So you're paying, let's say, I'm just gonna use a number. We're speaking about Seattle, right? Let's say you're paying a minimum of $2,000 per month. You have to pay for food. Let's say food, if you're getting cheap food, maybe it's $400, $300 per month, right? And then you have to think about your gas. All of these things that cost so much money. And then thinking about gas, if we move to transportation, the US is designed to be a country where you need a car. And that's one of the things I value and I adore about living in France. I don't have a car. So I don't even drive in France. The only time I drive is when I go back home to the US, and that's really it. But I will actually be getting my French driver's license because, like, okay, the plan wasn't to be here as long as I've been, but since I'm here and I'm probably going to still stay here, yeah, I need to start driving. But anyways, like, you can live somewhere, like if you live in a major city, you don't have to have a car. You can have your Metro card, you can take the bus, you can easily walk somewhere to go buy food if you need to. Like, it's so easy to be able to move around. And I think the urban planning of France, especially like major cities, because obviously you can live like in towns, and that in those places you need a car. But when you're living in a large area, the urban design of the place makes it accessible to people. And again, I will say there's a caveat. One of the things I think is really unfortunate in Paris specifically, right? And it's not just Paris, but I'm going to talk about Paris specifically. If you are someone that you have limited mobility, if you're on a wheelchair, it is really difficult to be able to navigate Paris. And I think about that when I'm in the metro, and I'm just like, how are people supposed to get in and out? Like, how? It's not possible. If you have limited mobility, that I will say is not a well-designed place. And I think that's unfortunate because it's not really thinking about everyone and making it accessible. And I think that's a part where in the US that is positive, because everywhere, for the most part, that you go to has to be wheelchair accessible. And I think that's a wonderful aspect that they have in the US, which I think France needs to adopt and do better, right? But again, pros and cons with all the places that you go. But I think the employer protection not being there, being able to fire at will, it doesn't make it for a safe economy. It makes it wonderful for the people that have all the money, but for the regular people that are doing the work to not be afforded that peace of mind, I think is really unfortunate. And I think that's where the US really needs to do better. Like, if the inflation is increasing, like, the wages need to increase. Like, it needs to fit, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. So, like, one of the things that here, like, if you are not earning at least 3 times like your rent, you're likely not going to get this apartment, and you need to earn at least 3 times, which means, again, the cost of the wages here are a lot lower than in the US. I will say that, right? Like, if you really want to make money, France is not a place to make money, okay? But again, the value system that they have here is very different from that of the US. So if you want money, the US is great to make money, but then your standard of living, it's not the same. And personally, I prefer the standard of living that I have here, okay? The fact that I feel at peace. I don't feel like I have to, you know, the phrase work to live versus live to work, that is literally night and day. That is US France. Or maybe not just US France. I feel like in the US, you work to live. Is that the phrase? You live to work? No, in the US, you live to work. It's just work, work, work. How 2 weeks vacation here, minimum. I think is it 4 or 5 weeks vacation, and especially if you're a teacher, there's vacations all the time. Now, moving on to food, I will say I feel safer eating food in France than I do in the US. When I was in the US, because I told you I did AmeriCorps, right? Because I did AmeriCorps, I was able to get food stamps. Okay, I love that. Okay, shit, I think it was $200 at the time, and I was organic everything, Trader Joe's, all of the stuff. I was getting all the stuff that year. Wonderful time. It was so difficult, but it was a wonderful time as well. But here, I feel safe eating the food because the regulations are a lot higher. Like the FDA in the US, or is it? Yeah, FDA in the US. I'm like, and considering who's going to be in charge of the FDA now, oh, goodness. But here, the regulations are tougher, right? So even not buying organic, I don't feel bad not buying organic here. I go to the farmer's market. It's open, I think, every day except Monday, if memory serves me right. I think Monday is the only day the farmers markets aren't open, but every day, Tuesday to Sunday, they're open. So you can go to the farm, and there's multiple farmers markets, like, in the neighborhood. Like, you can go to this neighborhood, you'll find one. You can go to another one, you find one. Like, I think that's so great that this is something that's normalized here. And I think one of the things that I used to complain about when I first came here, I had, like, a college-sized, dorm room-sized fridge in my apartment. And I'm like, what the hell? So because of that, I had to go shopping regularly. And now it's something I'm used to. And I recall, like, that studio that I lived in, I lived in that studio for a while. That studio that I lived in, it literally was the size of, like, the kitchen / dining room in Mom's house. Like, and when I went home, I'm like, why is the kitchen so big? Like, is this necessary? Like, I'm really looking how, like, the homes are just unnecessarily large, right? Whereas, like, now I'm used to, like, I'm a smaller space. Even though I'm a maximalist, and that's another issue in and of itself, but it's just, I just prefer the fact that there's just like a safety ease that I feel like exists here that doesn't exist in the US, right? It's just always the hustle and bustle. You don't know what you're eating, and then when it comes to, like, going out to eat, it's expensive, and then the expectation of you tipping 18%, girl, please. 18% where? Tip culture is not a thing here apart from the touristic areas, right? So if you're going out to eat, the gratuity is already included. The expectation that Americans are supposed to be paying 20% tip because their companies are not refusing to actually pay a livable wage to their employees is ridiculous. And I recall the last time I was home, which was like a couple of years ago, right? I took my mom to Azteca. We went to Azteca. Again, I hadn't been home in a while, okay? So the fact that we paid $70, well, I paid $70, it was a little more than $70 for just 2 of us at Azteca. I was like, girl, what? When did the prices become $30 for a meal at Azteca? I remember back in the day when you could go to Applebee's and get 2 for $20. What the hell? What, like, those things for me, I was just like, my brother is always saying like, if you ever move back here, you're gonna be shocked. And I'm already shocked as it is. Like, the prices are crazy. Again, it's not to say that prices aren't increasing here in France, because they are. There's definitely things that I'm noticing, like when it comes to electricity and, certain things are definitely increasing. But the fact that I pay 20 euros for my phone is like damn near, let's just basically call it unlimited internet, because I never even use all the internet that's even on this thing. I can call the US, it's included in my thing. 20 euros for everything. And there was a period, this was when I was at that apartment I mentioned earlier, where I was paying 10 euros a month for internet. Again, these things have increased, but it's okay, it's increased, let's say by $10, 10 euros. Things are definitely increasing. I'm definitely seeing that, but not the likes of what it is in the US, right? So it's the cost of living is not sustainable, for the fact that the wages are not increasing, and the government can do something about it, but they're refusing to actually do things about it, right? So I think that is really unfortunate. So again, for me, when it comes to these freedoms, are we really free? Are we really free? I like the fact that fresh produce, I can have access to that regularly, every day if I want to, right? The fact that my meats are not enhanced, they're not modified genetically. Like, things like that. I really prefer and appreciate that about France. Now, I have made a video before where I was like, French food is meh, and I still stand by that to this day. Okay, I've tried a plethora of dishes, the restaurants, etc. It's not it for me, right? Personally, like I've said this before, I think when it comes to desserts, in general, desserts, I feel like white people do desserts well. And when I say, I mean like for real, I'm being callous and say that. I'm just saying, like, for example, I've had like North African style desserts, and it's just West African style desserts. What is this? Like, you know what I mean? Desserts, I will give it to y'all. Desserts is good. However, when it comes to savory dishes, the umami isn't there for me. I'd rather eat Indian food, West African food, Chinese food, Asian food. Like, it's just, for me, French cuisine, desserts, bomb. Moving forward, I think I already spoken about this, I touched on this a little bit, but when it comes to the transportation and urban planning, I value how it's done here. I think it's unfortunate that the US is so car reliant, and again, it just feeds into the system of, you need to have a car, you need to, like, be showing off to the Joneses that you got it like that. You need to always be showing off that you have the best of the best of the best. And I think that is really just a sad mentality, and that's something you're not going to find really in France. But then I will also say the caveat is, in the US, I think when you kind of show off, it's something that's motivating. It might be a sick, weird way to look at it, but you're motivated, like, okay, this person was able to do it, I can do this too. Whereas in France, there is a jealousy that comes with that. French people don't like other people doing better than them. It's something I've noticed. I've spoken about this with like French friends, etc. It is a thing here. They don't like people like showing off and acting like they're better. And it's funny how people have this idea that French people are just like have their noses up and they're just whatever. In some aspects, I could see that, but really, when you're flexing, is not really looked at in a positive way here. There's a lot of jealousy when it comes to that. If you're showing that you got money in France, even though people do it subtly, but it's looked at in a certain way. But that there's another aspect of that. But I love the convenience of the metros, the bus systems. It just makes things so much easier and not having to be dependent on having a car. I think that is wonderful. So again, for me, these things when it comes to transportation, food, healthcare, costs of living / job security, education, and quote unquote, the gun situation, these things, if you don't actually have them accessible in a beneficial way for the population, I don't really see the US as being free. I don't see that freedom. I really don't. And again, like I've already touched on the freedom of the press, right? Are you really free? Freedom of religion. And even with that, when it comes to freedom of religion, if you're Christian, it's wonderful. Because imagine when you're being sworn in to be president, you're like have to swear in with the Bible. Or when you're in court hearings, I don't know if they still do that to this day. Correct me if I'm wrong. Swearing on a Bible, like, yeah, if you're Christian, Catholic, whatever, sure, great, wonderful. But if you're not those religions, then here comes the xenophobia. So there's that. To myth number, are we on 2? Technically myth number 3. So this is the value system in the US. The US values money. And I've already touched on that briefly and some of the other things that I talked about. But the sense of worth that people have in America is based on their money. This idea of the quote unquote American dream of pulling yourself up by your own bootstrap is BS, okay? Because when we think about it, especially for the people that have money, due to the wealth of their families, or money that they were left because of their families, oftentimes that comes behind the slavery system that the US has, right? Or had. They still do have it because of the prison industrial complex, but no one in the US who's like for real wealthy got there just because they did everything by themselves. They were afforded certain things, right? If Bill Gates hadn't been in the city that he lived in and done that particular program that he did and met his partner, etc., would not be where he's at. There is an aspect of luck, but there's also where you come from, the background that you have, the financial means that your family has that helps someone get to where they're going. It's not to say it's not possible, because it definitely is. I think one of the things that you can definitely do in the US is to become wealthy if that's something that's really important to you, and you do the things that you need to do, cut the throats, do whatever you want to do to get to that. I think it's definitely possible. I think in France it's difficult because, again, the earning potential here is quite low, right? But it's something that you want. I think it's definitely possible, but I think the idea of having your self-worth based on money is sad, because it just makes your value system just money based. So that's why people are working 60, 70 hours a week. Whereas here, the average work week is 35 hours a week. And 35 hours a week plus the 4 to 5 weeks of vacation a year, right? So I think the value system I personally prefer. I remember when I first came, when I first came to France, and trying to go to the grocery store on a Sunday and the damn things are closed. And not knowing that they close by noon. And I'm just like, what the hell is this? Where in the US you can go to a 24/7 grocery store. Or the fact that there are so many free like events, cultural events, public events that happen. You go to the park. Like one of the things that they do if you're in Paris ever in the summertime, I think it happens like July, August. It's called Paris Plage. Or any major city in France, I think they usually do, let's say Paris Plage, Nice Plage, whatever, right? And you can go to a park where they'll have like lounge chairs and you can play games, and it's all for free. They have so many free events, and I think that's so wonderful. Like they have museums every Sunday, and this is all over Europe. The first Sunday of a month, the museums are free. You can go to the museum. So a museum that would cost an arm and a leg, you can go there for nothing. So I think there's just a lot of things where it's just normal to actually live and experience things and do things and travel. And even traveling within Europe, it's so inexpensive. It used to be even cheaper. I remember a time with Ryanair, and this is before they started making you pay for your carry-on luggage, which honestly, this is a caveat, I think it's messed up that companies charge you for a check-in bag when you're traveling by plane. When somebody needs that. When I first moved to France, I had 2 checked-in luggage for free, but now you have to pay for each bag. I was like, rude. Anyways, but the fact that your self-worth is based on what you have, having to always show off, like, that you are doing well based on the car that you have, the house that you have, the things that we wear to show that, oh, okay, I got money. I think it's unfortunate that we value that. And it is this idea of keeping up with the Joneses, but I guess nowadays we would term it as keeping up with the Kardashians. It's unfortunate that is the value system rather than being able to be with the people that you love on a regular basis and enjoy your time together by doing things or traveling or whatever, going out, hanging out, going to the park. One of the things I love here in the summertime, springtime, people are in the park laid down reading their book. I do that all the time. I love it. And again, I've never lived in New York, so I wouldn't know, but I've seen people doing that in Central Park, right? And where I'm from, I don't see people just going to the park and laying down. The parks are just there and they're damn near empty. And it's such a shame. It's such a shame. Myth number 4. The idea that we have an actual democracy in the US, that our votes actually matter. This last few years have shown me that no, we live in an oligarchy. And that's what it's showing. And this next term that's going to happen is really giving that. It is really giving that. It is giving the Trumpism. It's giving the oligarchy. That's what it's giving right now. And it's a shame that the government prides itself on being free and having true democracy when it's in fact not the case. It's not the case. We can look around the world, like the value system that we have in the US, the way people are treated as far as being imprisoned for sometimes nothing, right? Just not having basic health care, education, things like that. And the government could do something about it, because we put so much money into the military in the US, where if we were to take 10% of that, we could help the country, help the individuals. But we don't do that because it doesn't benefit them. It doesn't benefit the people. It benefits the small group that gets to control and maintain their power. So again, when it comes to freedom what? Okay, again, it's just bullshit. And one of the things when it comes to the government that the US government could do if they wanted to change this is the fact that we privatize everything. Again, when it comes to the prison industrial complex, privatizing prisons so companies can use these individuals in the prison system and use them as slave labor and pay them nothing. Like we just saw with regards to California, the prisoners that were volunteering to be firefighters, really getting paid $5 to $10 a day to endanger themselves. Yeah, it's a very disgusting system that we have. But one of the things that I think is really interesting that doesn't have to be privatized, right? The fact that Americans have to do their own taxes. I don't do my own taxes in France. They send me the document. I log into the website. I look at it, make sure everything's right, and I sign it, and that's it. Because at the end of the day, the IRS knows where your money is going. They look into everything. They could literally just send you that document, sign it, but no, instead it's been privatized so companies can make money off of it. So we have, what is it called? Oh, I used to use this thing too. Inuit, Quick Facts? Something like that. I'm probably saying it wrong. Quick Tax? Something like that. I'm thinking it's like a red logo. But anyways, you have these companies or these individuals that want to make money in helping people file their taxes, when literally they can just send you the thing, boom, it's done. But no, privatizing everything helps the government make more money off of stuff that doesn't even need to be a thing. But yeah, that's just unfortunately the system that we have. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the rise of fascism that is happening in the US. Outside of the US, it's also existing in France. And most of Europe, it seems to be getting radicalized. But the fascism, the xenophobia, the racism that is happening, that's spewing, it just seems to be a thing that's kind of moving worldwide. And it's really sad. And I feel like because the world does see the US as a leading power, because the way the US has positioned itself, right, to be this oligarchic, imperialistic force by using its military force to impose on other people and other countries, it just seems like this is spreading and in turn kind of fucking the world over, because it's happening here as well. Like we have the Le Pens, we have the Macron, and their worldviews and the way they see things, etc. That's not beneficial to the population, right? But there are small groups that want to hold their ideals and push those forward, and I don't see how that unfortunately is helping, and it's definitely spreading. And I think because people are witnessing it with the US, it's influencing others to kind of do the same. And it's a shame because it's kind of like the world is just going backwards. And the last but not least, so in the US, there is a term that is used often: no one is above the law. Okay, so that is why we have a convicted felon that is now going to be the president of the United States. So if you are a white, rich man, I mean, this has always been the thing, right? You're always above the law. Because we know in the US you live in a white supremacist capitalistic patriarchy. And it makes sense that Trump doesn't have to suffer any consequences. And that's a shame. So I can understand, and not that I agree with it, why Luigi was radicalized in a way where he's like, you know what, I'm sick of the system, I'm sick of all this stuff that's happening and people abusing people when it comes to the healthcare, insurance companies, etc., taking the power in their own hands and fighting back. I don't think it's right in the way that it was done, but instead of, again, actually addressing the reason why this person did what they did, it's, oh, okay, all CEOs, remove your names off of your website because you can't be found, okay, and don't address the actual issues of why this person and did what he did and why the US is behind him and supporting him, because it's about defend, depose, and deny. So yeah, so these are some of my thoughts with regard, this was a lot longer than it was supposed to be, I'm gonna try to cut this down, but these are some of my thoughts about, you know, these myths that Americans are indoctrinated into believing. If there's anything that I'm missing from this list, and if you want a more in-depth list of things that I appreciate about my experiences having lived in France, if you have any questions for me, please do not be afraid to write me, write a comment below, add your myths of these beliefs that we have as American, or, you know, how the world even sees you. If you're not American and you have like certain beliefs or views of how Americans behave or idealize certain things or whatever, please write them. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, for listening to this video. If there's anything that I missed when it comes to the myths about living in the US and the indoctrination that we have as Americans, and, you know, the American centricism that we have and not wanting to really experience other cultures and worlds, please let me know let me know your thoughts with regards to this video, if there's anything that I missed to include. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you want more videos from me, please let me know what you'd like to hear about when it comes to France. Please check out the playlists I made in the past, because those videos are really old, but if you want an updated version of those videos, please do let me know. And if you are trying to, you know, move abroad to a different country, experience different cultures and people, I would definitely urge you guys to do so. The world is big. You have one life to live, experience. It really just changed the way that you think and view things, and I think it's a beautiful thing, and I'm just so happy I've afforded myself the opportunity to live in this country, experience things, even though it's negative and positive, but again, both countries have their positive and negatives, but it's just really changed my worldview, and I'm so grateful for that. I love that, and just taking a chance to do a study abroad, and how that choice has impacted the rest of my life is crazy to think. If you have that opportunity, I urge you to do it. I urge you to travel. Even if you can do a sabbatical, do it. Just take 1 year, 6 months, 1 month, whatever you can. Go somewhere else and live and experience and appreciate. And, you know, there will be aspects of it where you might appreciate, you know, certain things about your country a lot more, which there's aspects of that which I definitely do, because the bureaucracy in France, whew, that is something in and of itself. But the experience that you're afforded in just being and interacting with other people, I think is just, it's amazing, and I think everybody should have that opportunity. So if you can, please take the opportunity to, if you have any questions, please don't forget to ask. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and your girl will be back soon for a new video. Peace.